Hi, welcome back to Howl Along with Spot. It's been a little while. We're trying out this thing that's supposed to improve the sound. Um, and we do want to show some of our more recent buttons. But we also want to talk about some things, going back to how we got to where we are. The first time Spot's household voted in a presidential election was the 1976 election between Ford and Carter. You know, Ford and Carter are about the same to us, and it was that way then too. Um, we've been a Largo member since 1972. We believed in Marxist-Leninism at that point in time. We are anarchists now, and we've been an anarchist since the turn of the millennium, basically. But at that time, we saw capitalism as a problem, and we saw very little difference between individuals like Ford and Carter. Our concern was how Ford had become president, and that comes back to Watergate. Watergate involved the president using foreign, what amounted to mercenaries, to commit an act of espionage against our electoral system. At this time, that was a big deal. It's not right now. We know this fucking bastard, Trump, Barr, DeJoy, Cuccinelli, Wolf. These people are crapping on what it has ever meant to be proud to be an American. And what happened is that, Ford became vice president, and everyone knew, this was the way out of this big crisis. That, okay, we got a guy, Ford he was that day's version of Biden. And it was the way out of this crisis of having the Americans admit that their president was a sack of shit by having him just resign. And quite frankly, if Trump wants to run away to Russia and seek asylum right now, it could be considered. Wouldn't it? Rather than drag our country through this shit that, by this time next year, 3 million Americans might die because Trump, McConnell, DeJoy, they're fucking not Americans. They're not fucking patriots. And if you think that, you're shit. You're shit. And that's the thing, because what happened was that rather than, just pardoning Nixon for his crimes, Ford pardoned him for anything he may or may not have done through this extensive period of time. It was unprecedented. It meant that you didn't admit guilt. And things came out. Not anything as bad as Trump has done, but things came out that was much worse than people thought Trump and Nixon had done. But it didn't matter because it couldn't be charged because he was already pardoned, whether he was guilty or not. And if something didn't come up, it didn't come up. It didn't matter because he was already pardoned. Blank check, carte blanche. So, in 76, we were already a communist. We were a Marxist-Leninist at that time. That means a Leninist in terms of structure, as seeing the state as something that is trying to suppress a class, and you need to fight it by forming a state that can suppress that group. That's what Leninist means in Marxist-Leninist. And Marxist, and this is the part that's hard to understand by people today because they don't understand that, is that if you take out that part of that equation, you have this idea that, basic human needs should be met by a stateless society. That's in Marx's original document, the manifesto. The idea that eventually you'll get stateless, but the Leninists thought, with some reason, that the only way they could fight a state is to be a state. And that goes both ways. There's parts of both sides of that. I mean, that we could speak 10 times longer than the 15 minutes we have to hear about that. But the idea of a Republican government required a certain good faith effort to maintain certain basic ideas that Nixon had failed to obtain. And quite frankly, up to that point, any president who got anywhere near as corrupt as Nixon had gotten would have put a bullet in his own head before allowing their crimes to sustain the republic. And so the idea that Ford had become president by agreeing to give Nixon this kind of pardon, there was no way that anyone with any kind of moral value could support that. And that's why I voted against Ford. Now, one interesting thing to consider about that election is that the largest money raiser in that election was Ronald Reagan, who was not a final contender. And the thing is he had a lot of, when you raise a lot of campaign funds in an election, it's kind of like The Producers. If you ever watch that movie, it's a loophole. It's supposed to be a failure, but it's a success. And that was what positioned him to produce his form of politics, of economics, and his, at that time, neoliberalism agenda. And remember, liberalism, when you talk politics, A liberal democracy means a capitalism. It doesn't mean communism, it means capitalism. To anyone except for the idiots in our political system. The thing is that neoliberalism was the idea of a type of very corporate structure to supporting big business in economic financial decisions while having some social leeway in terms of more experimental or liberal thinking in terms of social policy. And this is what Reagan pushed while at the same time pulling other people into his reaction to the post-war Great reaction. And the thing is that this led to, let's shift that a little. It's not that it led to, it's that this is going on at the same time. The reaction overall is this feeling that, the 60s saw a rejection to materialism, and there was a need to reincorporate those who felt rejected back into a materialist system. That was where you had your yuppie movement, the idea of aspiring. Originally, it was actually yappy. They kind of took on right away that was not the way to go, framing or naming themselves. But young, aspiring professionals, the idea that you could buy into the system to change it from within by becoming conscientious consumers and all of this, and somehow change the system from within. We've seen that doesn't work. All it means is substance over image, and that's what leads us to people like President Trump. As that is going on, we have Clinton coming in, and he brought the neoliberalism of Reagan into the Democratic Party. And so you have neoliberalism within the Democratic Party, which is actually following the traditions of Reagan. And you have conservatism, which is following the same corporate agenda. But basically, if you look at the conflicts between Reagan, Clinton, Bush, you get the same economic policies, corporate favoritism, with disagreements about abortion and guns. That's all it is. And the thing is, as long as the factors, and then we get like the Lincoln Project, they're on our side right now, but it's the same thing. As long as a corporate agenda straddles the moderates of both parties, our nation cannot move forward.